Later on, I'm in a meeting actually. Okay, so welcome everyone. Today we will start the week one of our live session on this course on plastic waste management. So, introducing myself, I am Rajarshi Bhar and I have been allotted to be the teaching assistant on this course. And currently, what I'm doing is I'm working as PhD scholar under Professor Brajesh Kumar Dubey in the Department of Civil Engineering in IIT Kharagpur. So, how this course is designed in a way is that uh, basically we will be having about 15 questions every week, and we will be going through these questions. And mostly all of these questionnaires are based on the classes that are being there on NPTEL. And in the meanwhile, if you have any queries or doubts, or if this can be a knowledge sharing session back and forth, so we can have a good conversation. Since in this platform, I am expecting that we are joined by various learned personals, people from academia, students, and also sometimes industries. So we can often expect that this will be a great knowledge sharing session as well. And now we can go ahead with the questions that we have today. And in case you have any queries, you can stop me anywhere in between and we can have a discussion if there is any point or doubt that you guys might be having. And basically, today all the questions are theoretical based questions. And what we can do is that the session duration is 2 hours. So we will be covering each and every question, and maybe after showing you the question, we can take a pause of about 30 seconds for you to think about it, 30 seconds to 1 minute, and then you can share your answer either in the chat box or you can also unmute yourselves, whatever suits. And then after that, the answers will be disclosed. So now coming to the first question of today. So what happens to plastic waste? And these are the four options. So which one do you think is the most appropriate one? So basically it asks that whether it is a biodegradable material or not, or just it can disintegrate into pieces, or it says that plastic is not even a waste as it can be recycled, or generally it is dumped into ocean for fishes to eat. So which one do you think is the correct one? So I can see that option B, uh, Saroj has opted for option B. Any other ideas? Yeah, this is actually a very simple question. So basically, plastic wastes, they are generally not biodegradable unless and until they are some kind of bioplastic. And in that case also that it is not necessarily that they will be entirely biodegradable. There are different grades of it. So biodegradability, that is option A, it goes out of question. Then option B is it never fully goes away and just breaks down into little pieces. That makes real sense because we have been hearing about different issues on microplastics where a plastic it undergoes degradation. Not in the sense degradation, I must say disintegration or it breaks down to tinier pieces due to let's say thermal radiation, physical forces, if it is thrown into some ocean or water bodies or let's say on sand or land as well. So option B makes more sense, and C and D are not the correct ones. So option D says that it is dumped in the ocean for fishes to eat. So it is not dumped into the ocean, but we all have already an idea that if it is dumped anywhere, then through different channels, a huge fraction of it, you can say quite a significant amount, it goes into these marine bodies where it accumulates. And yes, these fishes and other marine organisms, they can ingest it. So option D is not the correct answer because it makes a sense that someone is intentionally dumping plastic into the ocean for fishes to eat, for fish to eat. So that is why option D is not correct. And in this particular question, B is the correct option. Now, Next question is about where does the majority of plastic end up in? Okay, so I can see that option A and option C. Any other guesses? Option B as well. Okay, so the thing is, if the question is that where the plastic waste majority of that ends up, so it means that we are looking for the final destination of that plastic waste. So if everything goes well and smooth, which is rarely the case, that means the collection efficiency is 100% and everything is 100%, and someone intends to burn those plastic wastes because they have very good calorific value and can be used as a fuel in boilers and different places. Then option A would have been the correct one, because in that scenario we are expecting that, let's say, the entirety of the plastic waste, someone is collecting it up, segregating it, and then removing all the water or moisture and then burning it. So under that ideal scenario, yes, that can go up for incineration and burn for generating energy. Also, landfills, if someone says that majority of the plastic it ends up in landfill, that is also highly doubtful, because if you see if you take the example of developing countries, you can see that the plastic waste, a huge fraction of it is often scattered around. And then option D, that is about recycling, that can also be some far-fetched dream. If everything 100% goes well, then only it can be done. So mostly if you Google this up, so I can say another thing, that if you have doubt in any question, you can at the same time, you can Google the question and see what different options you are getting, because sometimes you might have some query from the Google search results as well, that it shows something and you might have some other idea that something else is happening. So mostly what happens, that if you see that I just Googled the data, so it says that if I have to talk about the incineration, then only about at max 19% of the plastic waste is incinerated or burnt, and just 9% of it is recycled. And most of it, even if it, let's say, goes to some landfill, but later on during rains or maybe floods or due to wind, from one way or another, it goes to oceans and starts accumulating in the ocean. So let me see, there is a term uh, that is there, because in ocean also huge islands of plastic waste are often formed and they float around. I think someone in the meeting, do you have an idea what that term is called? It is often said like there is a very common word that there is a huge island of like all the plastic waste, a huge fraction of it accumulates together. And if you take a satellite photo, it will seem that there is a huge island of plastic waste. Let me just quickly Google it. Yeah, interestingly, it is very simple. So these islands or these huge agglomerations, they are basically simply termed as garbage patches. And if you take a look, I will try to share my screen. So you see, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch is a large collection of plastic and other marine debris in the ocean. So it is so huge that often satellite images also capture it. Let's see. If I take a satellite image here, so here you can see that in this particular place, if I click on this image, you see that this dark colored area here, this dark colored area. So this is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. So the area you imagine, it is so huge that even the satellite images are able to track this. So this shows the magnitude of the amount of plastic waste that in one way or the another, if you look at the freight and transport of this plastic waste, a huge fraction of it, or in this particular question, you must have an idea that majority of it, if unmanaged, it lands up in oceans or other this marine bodies, seas, and all these places. So I hope this is sorted, and then we can move on to the next question. Right. So the correct answer is option C. And the next question, which of the following is used to manufacture thin carrier bags? Now, this is a very simple question. Thin carrier bags, that plastic bags that we use in our day-to-day lives, what is it made of? Okay, I have not shared my screen, it seems. Yeah, it should be visible now. Is it LDP, SDP, polycarbonate, or PVC? Okay, option A. Yes, since I think most of you are inclined towards option A, and so that is the correct answer. Now, in the next question, which of the following options contain the top five contributing countries to the world's plastic pollution problem? Okay, so in this particular one, the correct answer that is shown here is Thailand. The option D, that is Thailand, followed by China, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Philippines. So sometimes there can be a conflict, like you must be having the lecture slides, or you must have gone through the lectures. So in case if I have seen that sometimes there's a conflict between the answer that we have and then what is being taught in the class, because maybe one of the data is either older or maybe some other reason. So in case if you are seeing any such issue, please feel free to mention it in the chat box or unmute yourself. Because the correct answer in this particular question is Thailand, China, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Philippines. That is option D. So now in the next question, it asks that what is the process of reclaiming raw materials and reusing them to create new products? Okay, so I can see that option C, that is recycling, is the correct answer, and most of you have selected that. So it was easy, and I can go to the next question. Now it is, says that the plastics which cannot be reheated to soften, shape, and mold are called which type of plastics? Right. Option A is the correct answer, that is thermoset polymer. Now, next is what does the number in the the triangle on plastic container mean? So every plastic container, even if you're using a plastic bottle or different chemical bottles, so all those bottles often they have some number inside a triangle. So what is the significance of that number? Right. Option D is the correct answer that it identifies the type of resin used. And I can see the question that that's in meant reuse beverage bottles, Limca for storing. Yeah, I can see that there is a question that the reusage of beverage bottles for storing drinking water, whether it can be harmful or not. So this question often arises that the number of times a beverage bottle can be used. So assuming that it is your plastic bottle. So what happens that in our institute only, one of our professors, they have conducted some studies on reusing or using of those plastic cups or thermocol cups. And I think in fact plastic bottles have also been looked into. So what happens basically if you take a beverage bottle and use it for quite a lot of number of times and the bottle has passed through heating, cooling cycles and all those stuff, then yes, definitely after a certain point of time, the microplastics that are there, they start coming to the water that is present there. For example, you must, if you see you're using a plastic, those Bisleri bottles, and you keep those bottles under strong sunlight for a number of days, and you will see that the thickness of the bottle itself, you can experience that it is reducing. So definitely, people have seen that there are studies that after a certain number of cycles, these kind of bottles they should not be used for drinking purposes. So I hope that answers your question. So we will move on to the next question. How long does it take for a plastic bag to decompose on an average? Yes, option C is a very obvious option. That is, it will take more than 1000 years. Then, next one, which of the following statement is true about plastic waste? Yes, option C is the correct answer. That plastic waste, when burnt openly, it produces many harmful gases, which can be your dioxins, furans, PCBs means polychlorinated biphenyls, carbon monoxide, then polyaromatic hydrocarbons. So these gases are really toxic. Some of them are carcinogenic, and often they can also have very, very high global warming potential as well. And if I have to look at option A, which says that plastics can be easily biodegradable, obviously this is wrong. Can be used to make a compost. So the interesting thing is, often you must have seen that there are different bioplastics out there in the market. People advertise them to be compostable, but it has often been seen in our peers have also looked into it that those so-called compostable bioplastics, like if you really try to compost it along with your food waste and let's say garden waste, yard waste, and all this stuff. So instead of becoming a good compost, it becomes kind of entirely a mess. So rather, it is instead of solving the problem, it becomes somewhere in between. So now it can't if you have to deal it, treat it or compost it along with your garden waste. So the product that finally gets out or comes out, it can neither be used as a compost nor it can be then thrown away nicely. So there is an urgent need that people who are advertising their plastic as bioplastics or composted plastics, so regulating authorities should make sure that actually that stuff that they are selling as bioplastic, it is really either some fraction of it is either biodegradable or at least it is compostable. So that is that, and this sorts the question. So we will move on to the next one. What can you do to help stop plastic pollution? Yep. So this question is also very basic. Option D, that is all of the above is the correct answer. Then now the questions will be true and false type. So COVID-19 pandemic drastically increased the consumption of single-use plastic, whether it is true and false or false. So I guess most of you have already covered all this and experienced these things. So yes, option A is the correct answer. And then next one, the raw materials to make plastic is petroleum oil. So this is also true. Petroleum oil is used to make plastic. So the statistics given in the training slides are from 2018. Can we be provided with the current statistics? Okay, so I will pass this message to the faculty who is Professor Dubey, who is teaching this particular course to share with you the current statistics about the plastic waste generation, I guess. Are you talking just about the generation, Deepa, or in general the entirety of it? Okay, so plastic waste generation, I will make a note of it and convey it. So let me check if I can help you out with a official report on this. Just give me a moment. I'll try to see if I can get a proper figure or charts on this. Okay, I will make a note of it, and once we have gone through all the questions, we can discuss this, the recent or the latest data on plastic waste generation from some of the trusted sources. Okay, so the next question is, there are no alternatives to single-use plastic products. So again, I guess most of you will guess the correct answer, which is option B, false, because there are a number of ways to substitute the single-use plastics by using jute bags, paper bags, and all those stuff. Then coming to next question, second last question is that plastic waste can be managed better if we implement circular economy. So again, I know that you will be, yes, option A is the correct answer, very obvious. And then all plastics are polymers, but not all polymers are plastic. So your thought on that? This is, I guess, the most interesting question. So, any other ideas on all plastics are polymers, but not all polymers are plastic? So, option is the correct option because all the plastics, all of them are made of polymers, like various units. They are joined together to form polymer, but there are several other polymers like cellulose, hemicellulose, which are also having same structure repeated over a long chain, but they are typically not coined or not does not fall under the term of plastic. So that is why option A is the correct option. So we are done with all the questions, 15 questions that we had in store today. And as you can see that in this course, mostly I have seen the questions and they appear more or less more like a, mm, you can say more awareness based course. There won't be much numerical questions, but mostly uh, this is designed, I guess, to increase or improve your awareness on how to deal plastic waste, how to manage it properly on that. So now I will try to go through a report to see if we have any latest data on the quantum of plastic waste generated daily. Let me just see. Okay. Okay, so there's a source from Statista, this particular site. Okay, so it shows the amount of plastic waste with respect to different applications. We need to see if we can find something based on countries. Okay, so this is one source that I found, which was published in 2024, last year, and it shows that if I'm talking about per like kg or mass of plastic waste being generated per person, so that is highest in Singapore, then Australia, Oman, and Netherlands. Like this is the list. But often you can get a different picture if you think about the generation of plastic waste country-wise daily, because if it is per person, so countries having like Australia having lower this population, so the total amount of plastic waste generated that might not be as much as compared to India, where even though the plastic waste generation that might be low, like in this particular list, I don't see India anywhere. So there's a probability that even though India may have a lower value of plastic waste generation per person, but it doesn't mean that the total quantum of plastic waste generated from India it will be lower because the population will balance that out. So yet still I will convey this particular point to the professor and see that like this kind of questions can be avoided in the final examination because that clearly depends on the data at the time when this a certain publication is there on plastic waste. So what I will do now is that I will quickly go through all the questions again so that those who might have joined late, they can also have a look at the different questions. So what happens to plastic waste? In here, there are different options on the final fate of the plastic waste. So the correct answer here is it is option B, that it never fully goes away and just breaks down into little pieces called microplastics and macroplastics, both can be. And these kinds of smaller plastics, they can finally find their way into human bodies, various other organisms, even vegetations as well. Then the next question is, where does the majority of the plastic end up in? So they end up in oceans. So that's why we have discussed that huge garbage patches are formed in oceans. One of the very famous example is the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which can even be seen from the satellite. So that is the magnitude of the issue that we are facing. Then the next question is, what is the thin carrier bags or plastic bags that we use daily are made of? So they're typically made of LDPE, low density polyethylene. Then, which of the following options shows the top five contributing countries to the plastic pollution problem? And this particular data is subjected to the like a particular time from which the data is taken. So as per this particular question, the correct answer is option D. Then next is, what is the process of reclaiming raw materials, using them to create new products called? It is called recycling. And then if there is a plastic which cannot be heated to soften it, shape it, and then let's say mold it into some other shape. So those kinds of plastic are known as thermoset polymer. After that, what does the number in the triangle on the plastic container means? Container, bottle, or various other places, or the types of plastics. So they typically identify the type of resin used or the type of polymer that is present in that plastic. Then, how long does it take for a plastic bag to decompose? Obviously, the correct answer is it can go up to like stay for up to 1,000 years. Then, which of the following statement is true about plastic waste? The correct statement here is that it produces harmful gases when openly burned, like your various aromatic compounds, PH, which are called. Then your furans are there, and then various other PABs. So these emissions can be carcinogenic. They can have a huge global warming potential. They can even degrade the ozone layer. So there are a number of issues associated with the gaseous emissions on burning of plastic waste. And then if you have been asked to stop plastic pollution, so all of the above are the correct answer, because you can refuse the use of single-use plastic, straws, and all this kind of stuff. Bring your own reusable bags. Then also ask merchants and other people to consider plastic-free approaches. After that, yes, COVID-19 drastically increased the consumption of single-use plastic, obviously because we didn't want the spread of disease due to the reuse of plastic and going it from one hand to another. A very obvious answer. And then the raw material to make plastic is petroleum oil. Again, this is true. Then there are no alternatives to single-use plastic products. This is false, because you can use paper bags, jute bags, and various other types of waste bags instead of single-use plastics. And in fact, you can use some certain types of plastic bags, and that can be used again and again. After that, plastic waste can be managed better if we implement circular economy. That is true, because the plastic waste that is generated, it can be then again go back through recycling cycles to fabricate it into something else or remold it. Then in a circular economy concept, it can also be turned into various types of oil, which can again be used instead of petrol. Those oils can be also used in different application, because they have got good heating value. And then all plastics are polymers, but not all polymers are plastic. This is also true, because if you talk about polymers like cellulose, not protein, cellulose, hemicellulose, lignin. So these are also kinds of polymer, but they don't come under the bracket of plastic. So these were the questions that we had today. I will quickly see if we have any queries or points in the chat box. Trade India and India Mart crushed plastic is available to sell it, but okay, so the crushed plastic can be used in various places. So people use one of the uh, m- news that you must have seen is that Indian government is actively promoting the use of various types of crushed plastics for road construction. So they can, a certain fraction of it, they can also be used while laying the roads. So that solves one of the issue of managing the plastic waste. And then soft plastics can again be used and then sent through different techniques, thermal techniques like pyrolysis, gasification. And what these kind of thermal techniques do is that they can convert the crushed plastic into different kinds of fuel or fuel-like materials. For example, why we crush the plastic basically is, for example, if you have a plastic bottle and you want to transform it into something else through different chemical reactions. So the most principal idea is that whenever you want some reaction to happen, we know that it happens when the particle size is as small as possible. Because if you have got, let's say you have a plastic bottle and you have to ask like, what is the total, its surface area of that plastic bottle? So it will have some value. And we have gone through these kind of questions when we were in our school as well. Like if you have a cube, it has a certain volume. You cut the cube in such a way that a single cube is being divided into 100 cubes of smaller dimension, then you will see the total surface area it increases. And when the surface area increases, that means that the probability of that reacting under different conditions that also increase. So if you want to chemically transform your plastic, it is always advisable to crush the plastic. In that way, if you send it through pyrolysis, what happens that it can be transformed into your biochar, coal-like material. It can be transformed into your petroleum oil-like of material, and at the same time, syngas can also be produced, or sometimes hydrogen-rich gases, which all of which have a fuel value. So that is why crushed plastic can be used at different places for different types of applications. And then the next is question is when we make road, how much plastic is being used? Like 1 kilometer, how much is needed? Okay. So actually, this kind of answer, the people who are from transportation engineering background, they will be better apt, better, they must have a better idea to answer these kind of questions. What is the life of these roads as compared to concrete? Because what basically I am working on is environmental side of it. And I have seen people who have actively tested and said that, okay, plastic can be used. So if I just have to Google it to answer your questions, let me see if I can find anything. How much plastic waste can be used to lay roads and life? Okay. So when I did this, the first thing that I got is it says that while laying road, bitumen road to be specific, for every kilo of stone that is being laid, 50 grams of bitumen is used, and 1/10 of this bitumen is the plastic waste. So, plastic waste is kind of coming, it is partially substituting bitumen, and bitumen is again fossil based. So, if you're using plastic, so you are also reducing your reliance on fossil resources. But if plastic is used in summers and due to friction, microplastic. You see, like this is an interesting point. If the plastic is being used instead of your bitumen, so we can think like when bitumen is laid, so bitumen kind of acts as an adhesive. So if the plastic is melted and then laid along with bitumen, then I don't think this microplastic kind of issue will come into picture. But otherwise, if plastic is laid as such, then yes, the friction-based microplastics, they can be generated. In fact, along with microplastic, there is also, you must have seen an increasing issue of micro rubbers because of since rubber tires are there every day running on roads, so those micro rubber, they are also one of such issues. Let me see if I can find a better answer. These questions will the assignments be multiple choice. Okay, so the assignments are typically multiple choice, true and false, fill in the blanks type. If it is fill in the blanks, again you will have the options, or sometimes they can be multiple options. Like if there are four or five options, more than one of them can be correct. So these are typically the three type of questions that are there. Let me see if I can find something about the plastic waste used in roads. So I can find a source which is World Bank blogs. So let me see what it says. So any inputs on harmful gases during plastic conversion to oil. So you see when usually whenever there is an industrial process to convert the plastic into oil, ideally if someone is adhering to all the policies and all the protocols, then what happens that the oil before how the oil is collected, it is basically you heat the plastic under mostly inert conditions or some particular specific conditions, and the volatiles, that is the gases that is formed, it goes on through some cool place, so condensation takes place, and then the non-condensable gases, they ideally should not be emitted directly into the atmosphere. Those gases, they again go through various treatment processes like scrubbing, wet scrubbing, dry scrubbing. Then maybe if there are some particulates there, so your electrostatic precipitators are there to remove the particulates. And after that, most often the gases are also, if they have to be released, those gases are burnt completely so that most of the carbon material that is present there, it is converted into carbon dioxide. In that way, at least the gases that are being emitted, they are CO2 and not some other carcinogenic or very severe greenhouse-based gases. Or otherwise, if you are generating gases like carbon monoxide and hydrogen, although carbon monoxide is not of much use, but the hydrogen that is present there, that can be used as a fuel. So you can separate out the hydrogen, and then the remaining of the gas, they can be treated accordingly as per the composition of that gas. So there is an interesting question here. Yeah, let me see. And yes, if I have to look into the matter that whether plastic roads can release microplastic, that is of course a possibility that the microplastics can be generated and can go on to contaminate both soil and water. So that is true. So who has pointed that? Dr. Hema, yeah. So you have correctly stated that using plastics for roads, they can, even though they can solve one issue of managing the plastic waste, then at the same time the microplastic issue, that is something else that is generated. Okay. So do we have any other queries or questions? And I urge the audience that you can also share your experiences. Like you must also have, many of you might have come across different projects or assignments on such plastic waste related issues. So you must have some unique experience there. So you can share that with us so that it can be an enriching experience for both the parties. What I basically deal with is not plastic waste management, but my PhD or research, it is mostly aligned with your conversion of your waste, mostly organic waste, into hydrogen or coal-like material. So I am more inclined there as a part of the deliverables, and since I am from the environmental background and management of solid waste, plastic waste is a part of that issue. So that is why it can be a real help if we can have more discussion on this particular topic. Because plastic waste, it can be converted into different types of fuel, as most of you might already have an idea. In case, just a disclaimer, in case if someone is not interested in the meeting, so we have discussed most of the questions, and typically the meeting timing is, the live session timing is 6 to 8. But if you are always free to leave the meeting whenever you want, there is no mandatory rule that you have to be there till 8. Rest, if you have any questions, you're always free, welcome to share that on in the chat box or about, or unmute yourself. So I can see that. Can you speak about biogas? Okay, so biogas is basically your biomethane. Biomethane is pure methane, but biogas contains methane, carbon dioxide, and some other trace gases, and it is generated from your biological matter. For example, you have your food waste, you have your yard waste or garden waste, which can are biodegradable in nature. So what happens, you add some certain required amount of water to that waste, and since biogas is produced due to microbial activity, you need to add a particular type of microbe, which are called methanogens or anaerobic bacteria. So these kind of bacteria, they thrive in the absence of your oxygen, or in, like, basically what happens is that if you want to produce biogas, the term is you have to, the process is called anaerobic process, which takes place due to the presence of bacteria that instead of taking oxygen, they rely on other your materials or other types of chemicals to grow, thrive, and finally produces biogas as their metabolic product, mainly constitutive of methane. And after that, I hope that answers your question. And then
Yeah,
next,
actually, Rashi, what I wanted to know now, whatever biogas I've seen, it's more of large plants which has to be established.
right.
So, is there any possibility? Is there anything which you know where simply at home, it can be used for at a home purpose? Most of
Ye-
it are very large. It's a bit of capital intensive.
No,
See,
but
I work.
right, right. Please go ahead.
As I work in the area of composting for last couple of years, and I have
Mhm.
worked at large scale composting, like for my apartment and colonies and all.
Right.
So we were looking at some biogas options, which can be done, but mostly what we have seen are very capital intensive. Without sponsorship or CSR, we are not able to do it. So is there any smaller or easier solution, which can be used for lower income group, which can be set up, like it's more do it yourself or hands-on kind of a thing? Because we promote composting that way at home and everywhere, where people
Right,
can
right.
learn on their own do. So that was my basic
Okay.
inquiry.
Yeah, so I have seen, like, often when our peers, like, who are working in this biogas based domains, they go out to different site visits. So they have seen that people in village areas also, where a lot of your agricultural waste and maybe some food waste, all those stuff in different your restaurants and all, those are generated. They are basically in those places, they are using very desi homemade style of biogas plants, because basically you don't need anything. You need an enclosed tank, put in your degradable waste, just like composting works. Just the inoculum there is different. So biogas is actively produced there. Unless and until there is a certain drawback with the biogas generation, is that if, for example, your set of microbes, they have a habit of eating your agricultural residues, like let's say wheat straw, rice straw, whatever it is. But if those microbes are trained for that, but these kind of microbes, they are very delicate also. So if instead of that you all of a sudden you add some other kind of organic waste which is
Hmm.
having very high COD, like you must already be accustomed to this. So these kind of shock loadings or sudden changes in temperature or your organic matter loading rate, so those can sometimes reduce the biogas generation efficiency. But otherwise, we have seen that people in different places and villages, they actively produce biogas by using desi approaches
But
through jugaad.
how do they capture it? Matlab, capturing is a big issue. But they capture it somewhere in a tank or
Oh, yeah. So they
directly
basically, instead of capturing, that is right. So instead of capturing, they directly use it for stoves and all
directly
those
use
stuff.
it. Yeah,
So
that way.
capturing is a pressurizing it. So all of that is a issue that cannot be possible in the rural areas. That is
Oh.
true.
So I'm in Bangalore. If you have, I mean, if you have any leads in Bangalore, if you could sort of let me know, I would love to
Sure.
see it and see if I can. I basically work in a social workspace,
Okay.
so then I can kind of take it up and do some pilot project in a community.
Sure. So can you drop your email ID somewhere in the chat box? So in case
Hanji.
I find something, I can share it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
welcome. So the next question is crushed plastic recycled or it is converted to energy? So that is an option. If you like, if you want to recycle the crushed plastic, you melt it or pass it through few other processes and produce some other plastic based material. So that can be recycling. Otherwise, there is also an option if you want to just convert it into other kind of fuels. So you can do that. Depends on the intention. Okay, so give me a moment. Okay, thank you. So I have noted the email ID. So in case if I come across something, I will share that with you on this.
Sure, sure, Ash.
Fine. So do we have any other queries?
If there's nothing, if you can talk about your project, it will be nice to know. I mean, in
Actually,
a sense, a little bit more, just to understand.
actually, what I am working on is instead of going for this biogas, my area is firstly convert these your lignocellulosic or agricultural residues, or in fact any other food waste type of residues into your coal-like material, which is called hydrochar. So basically, what happens is coal, when we burn it, the carbon dioxide that goes into the atmosphere that contributes to your global warming. That is very obvious.
Pollution, yeah, yeah.
So
Ozone layer.
yeah, so there is another concept which is called carbon neutral. So the idea behind it is that if you are burning something, for example, a crop is there, it took or assimilated some carbon during its lifetime from atmosphere, and then let's say if you're burning a certain fraction of it, the idea is you are again releasing the same carbon back into the atmosphere. So the carbon that was first captured, it was then released. So it becomes a carbon neutral process. Instead, if you are burning your fossil fuel, then what happens that the fossils were produced through a process that took place for millions of years. So the carbon balance that is very radically changed. So if we can substitute a certain fraction of that fossil carbon or fossil coal with some other coal-like material that is obtained or derived from your biomass, so that can ideally reduce the global warming potential or carbon footprint. So in that case, what we do is that we artificially, under lab conditions, we kind of simulate the scenario how the coal was formed. So under your higher temperature and a bit of pressure, we subject the biomass along with some moisture or water. And under those conditions, it transforms into a coal-like material, mostly or maybe lignite or sometimes anthracite based, but mostly lignite based coal. So then that coal can be used for different purposes, maybe substitute your fossil coal in different places.
Lot of these places they use that coconut husk, and even I've
Right.
seen, yeah, in many of these small lower income group who cannot afford coil,
Hmm.
they actually collect this coconut shells, and for heating water, I've seen them actually little bit of coal, and they'll add this. so it goes on burning. So I
Right,
think,
that is one of the most commonly used options.
yeah,
So,
and I think someone has also converted those into brick form, and those bricks are being used.
right. So
Mm,
these can be used in, like, people are trying to use it in different domains. So that is something based on R&D, so people can try out different things. So the major part here is to see the techno-economic, whether it makes some economic sense or not, because people
yeah,
can prove something that is can work, but often, for example, the other part of my work is related to hydrogen production. So even though hydrogen production, these thermocatalytic processes, they sound very interesting, but the economics behind it is not at all feasible currently, because the energy consumption, it takes a huge toll, and economically people, in
yeah.
fact industrial people have seen that as of now currently it doesn't need makes much sense, and people need to work on it further, particularly on hydrogen storage and supply to make it
Yeah.
a bit easier.
I recollect IIT Mandi has done this project. You
On
can
what?
look it up on creating bricks from biomass.
Okay, okay, right.
There is
So
someone, I worked in the Himachal's area, so I remember once someone had done a project in IIT Mandi, or the
okay,
stimulated the entire project. You can Google it or speak to.
using biochar or these kind of material in bricks. Yeah, so
Yes,
these are happening in many colleges. In fact, in our college also, I have seen, like, recently people working on adding, in fact, instead of char, they're directly adding your rice husk or wheat straw, grinding this a bit, and then adding.
yeah, even those paddy husk
Right,
and all is, if you can use somehow, we can hugely reduce pollution in entire northern belt actually.
true. So,
Yeah,
one in,
actually, we were using sludge also in making the bricks.
Uh,
with this rice straw and a few other agricultural stuff, what we had an experience with is that recently we had a workshop where people from Punjab, they took participate. So what they had an interesting opinion that is that the kind of lignocellulosic residues that were generated for them currently it is much more economical if they either burn it, that we see there, the stubble burning issue, or maybe feed to the cattle, or sometimes spread on the field if they have some problem, some time, or time is a constraint. So instead of that, if you have to see that converting it into biogas or your these kind of hydrocha kind of projects, so due to again the supply chain related issues, so in Punjab, people are facing problem with that, because in Punjab, government is also actively working in establishing these biogas plants, so that the huge amount of agricultural residues, they can be converted into biogas, but people are not actually that much inclined on that, and mostly due to the amount of money and time there.
yeah, I think like Dr. Hema mentioned that mulching and crushing some machines have been made, which I think the Punjab government also bought and deployed, but only on experiment basis they have done
Mhm.
it.
Okay, so Dr. Hima has a question on, can you help tell the temperature at which plastic bottles start? So, Dr. Ahmed, do you mean to ask that at what temperature plastic bottles starts kind of dissolving or degrading into the water? That right?
Yeah, actually, small particles which enter into the water, call
Mm-hmm.
it micro, nano, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, can we know what exact temperature at which it starts entering into the water in any form?
Okay, so actually, what happened is I can share a few experiences. Like my seniors in this lab, they are working with the fate and transport of microplastics. So, what the person is
Okay,
Vara Prasad. So, you can also Google him up. I don't know
okay,
if he still has a publication on that or not, but his observations have been interesting. So what he did is that I have seen him doing, he took your plastic of different sizes, and those were subjected to your alkaline conditions and then different kinds of irradiation also. So what he concluded is that along with temperature playing a role, the kind of environment or your this what you call the chemistry, the aqueous chemistry that is taking place, and the kind of thermal that UV radiation. So that also plays a role for the generation of microplastics. So exactly if we have to talk about the temperature, so I don't think that there can be a single or particular temperature from microplastic generation. Rather, like if some place there are more inorganics in water that can abrade the or this abrasion is taking place with the plastic, so they can also again play a role. So in terms of particular temperature at which the microplastics are formed, I need to check it up. Let's see if I Google it up, but
Because
definitely,
if you can just focus on this mineral bottles or that big bottles, 20-liter bottles when they are transported, does that
yeah, that can
play
be an
a major role?
interesting study. So I need to check it up because what kind of study people have done to see. So maybe in the next live session, I can go through a few studies on
Yeah,
this
that would be great.
impact of temperature on microplastic generation. So that is an
Yeah,
interesting on microplastic. Okay. So in the next live session, maybe we can discuss on this.
yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thank you. Joy? Uh, hmm? Hmm. ওই যাচ্ছিস কোথায়? ঠিক আছে, আমার হয়ে গেলে আমি এসে যাবো। যদি কেউ সবাই চলে যায় আমি আর কি করবো তাহলে বসে? আছে তো 8টা অব্দি। Okay, so if you have any other doubts or queries, then please share them in the chat box or unmute yourself. Or if just type in a message. Yeah, so you can see that there are two questions by Deepa Arora. One is on polyvinyl chloride recycling, PVC recycling. There are things there's so many. Yeah, PVC can be recycled, so you can melt it and convert it into different shapes. But since this is called got chlorine, so sometimes based on the conditions, you need to be a bit more careful with such chlorine-based polymers because the chances of corrosion, which may be there due to the formation of sometimes HCl, hydrochloric acid-based and volatile gases, so they can cause corrosion based on the type of pipes being used. So just we need to be careful for that. And the other question is one more question is thermocol, which I think yeah, thermocol can also be recycled based on the type of form that you need. So when I googled it, I saw that thermocol can again be crushed and then recycled by compressing it and sometimes melting it like that. Welcome. So we can again go ahead and discuss the questions. Let's say after 15 minutes at 7:30. Huh? What is this? Yes, is? Oh, thank you. Jaideepa missed it? Yeah, damn. Mm, it's really tasty. Me at that time, I will tell you something. Basically, we were telling about three feedstocks. No? So, no, no, let everyone have. So she was saying like we discussed it, but we had a plan, like getting three feedstocks. I mean, this data of three feedstocks. So she already has the data regarding the supply chain of those feedstocks. Okay. But if we, yeah. So based on that, we will make a proposal saying that this has been applied for. I mean, this has already seen. Already, we have done some research for West Midnapore area, and this can be expanded for further Indian context. Same approach to test the supply chain. Yeah. Same approach. Okay, so I can see that there are a few more questions. One is that how plastic waste management can we make efficient in India? So, like, this is more of a narrative question. So, in India, if you have to look at plastic waste management, so the most important thing for managing plastic waste, it starts at the root, that is the generation of the plastic waste. And if you see like the waste production hierarchy, in order to handle most of the types of waste, the first and foremost priority is reduce. That is, you need to reduce the generation of waste by avoiding approaches that will lead to plastic waste generation, maybe shifting towards other types of substitutes instead of plastic. For example, avoiding single-use plastic by using jute bags, using them again and again, stuff like that. And assuming that plastic is generated and now you have to manage it. So in that case, the most important part is segregation of the waste. Because, for example, from your household, if you are successfully able to have two separate bins, one for plastic waste and let's say plastic and at max paper, and the other for organic waste. In India, what we basically denote them by wet waste and dry waste. In wet waste, we mostly add the biodegradable material, and in dry waste, the non-biodegradable ones. So in that case, once we have segregated the waste right in our home, and then once the waste collection that truck comes and it has got two separate containers, one for wet waste, one for dry waste, then what happens is that in the next stages, you don't have to invest a huge quantum of money to then go on and separate an entire mixture of waste because that makes things very difficult and is often less economical, much less economical. So that is why if you have to address the plastic waste management problem and assuming that it is being generated, so the first and foremost important thing is in the dose in the household system itself, you need to separate the wet waste, that is the degradable waste and non-degradable waste. In that way, one benefit that can be obtained is that the degradable waste can be directly treated for or converted into compost, biogas, all those stuff because if plastic waste and other stuff is there in those organic materials, so the efficiency of the process it drastically drops down. And nextly, if you have a separated waste, so then it is much more easier to handle that waste further. So now assuming that the waste is separated and you have got plastic waste, so the second one of the important issues that we have seen people dealing with is that if you have different types of bottles, Coca-Cola, Limca, Campa, all those stuff, so these bottles, they often have those dyes on them and then different kinds of wrappers on those plastic bottles as well. So dealing with all those things is another issue. So if you want to manage this, then maybe there can be a homogenized way of handling different types of plastic waste. That can be one way out for India. And another is instead of open dumping, mostly we see that people take the waste and dump it openly in some place. Instead of that, there should be at least scientific landfills so that there is a systematic and engineered collection, waste collection system. And if it is the situation is a bit better, you have got incinerators with proper air pollution control devices. Because in incinerators, if you put in plastic waste can generate a lot of energy. You can tap into that energy, use it for different activities. But the downside is that there is also going to be a lot of emissions during the combustion of plastic. So if you have got a good air quality system or management system installed there that can take care of the different corrosive gases by using wet scrubbers, dry scrubbers, and then also particulate matters can be trapped by fabric filters, electrostatic precipitators, stuff like that. Then incineration of plastic waste is another important aspect that can be looked into. Recycling is there. But if, let's say, due to the heterogeneous mix of plastic, it is difficult to recycle, then you can incinerate it. Otherwise, the options that we have just explored, like pyrolysis, gasification, these can again be some options to convert the plastic into your liquid fuel or gaseous fuel. So these can be some of the ways to manage plastic waste in India. And the most important part is if I have to look into any waste collection challenge, so the most cost incurring phase is the waste collection phase. So if we can put in appropriate awareness efforts into separate collection of plastic waste, that can be really helpful. So then the next question is, I have one doubt, is every type of recyclable accepts. Actually, in fact, single-use plastic can also be recycled, but it is very difficult to get hold of all the single-use plastics. Rather, like because other types of plastic, there is a established supply chain. Kabadiwala comes into our home. They collect different plastic materials so that it can be sent to different recycling centers. Let all, even though if they are formal or informal, registered or are not registered, but the system is there. But for these plastic, so I think there is a bit of work to be done there. What is the best use of single-use plastics? So the major challenge for the single-use plastic is to bring it back into the waste collection stream. So if everything goes nicely and you have got a single-use plastic and let's say it is of no use, then instead of throwing it away anywhere, if you have different your dry waste collection bins allocated, dedicated dry waste collection bins, you can discard your single-use plastics there. So then it will be much easier to separate them and handle them. Let me see. Best single-use plastic management. Hmm. And another obvious reason for single-use plastic to reduce the reliance on that is because the name itself is single-use. So if you are just more and more using the single-use plastics and then throwing it away, so the amount of plastic waste generated that also increases significantly. So that is another threat. So I can see that Karishma has raised her hand. So do you have anything, any doubt or any point to add? Karishma Das. Please feel free to unmute yourself and or use the chat box whenever you have something to add. You're always welcome to do so. Not an issue at all. So now we will quickly go through the questions again so that those who have joined late, they can have an idea. So again, uh, during all these live sessions weekly, we will be having mostly 15 questions, and I am expecting that majority of them are theoretical based, intended to increase our awareness on the plastic waste management. And today's question are also in the similar pattern. So the first question is, what happens to plastic waste? So among the four options, the most appropriate one is that it never fully goes away and just breaks into little pieces. The next is, where does the majority of plastic waste end up? So they mostly end up in oceans. So that is why we often hear in news that huge plastic patches are there in oceans, floating islands of plastic. You can imagine them as. And one of the example is Great Pacific Plastic Patch, which is so huge that even if you take a satellite image, that can clearly detect the entire agglomeration of plastic. After that, the carrier, thin carrier bags that we use, what is it made of? It is made up of low density polyethylene. And in terms of the top five contributing countries towards plastic waste problem, so it depends on the time from which the question has been framed. For this particular one, the option D is the correct option, which is led by Thailand, China, followed by Indonesia, Vietnam, and Philippines. After that, what is the process of reclaiming raw materials and reusing them to create new products called? It is called recycling. Then plastic, which cannot be reheated to soften, reshape, or remold, is called. It is called thermoset polymer. And often you can see that on different plastic bottles or other components, there is a triangle inside which there is a number. So the triangle and the number, it basically shows you the type of resin or polymer or the material that plastic is, whether it is polystyrene, whether it is HDPE, LDPE, what is it. And then how long does it take to for a plastic bag to decompose? It can take up to 1000 years. Then which of the following statement is true about plastic waste? So among these, the true is option C, that is, it produces harmful gases when openly burnt. After that, what can you do to help stop plastic pollution? In this case, all of the above options are true because you have to refuse the use of single-use plastic and straws and other such options and bring your own reusable bags for different purposes. And also, in order to spread awareness, you need to ask merchants, restaurants, and other such establishments to consider using plastic-free alternatives. Then again, a very common question that in COVID-19 pandemic drastically increased the consumption of single-use plastic. It is true. The raw material used to make plastic is petroleum oil. It is also true. There are no alternatives to single-use plastic products. This is false because there are a number of alternatives. You can use jute bags, other kind of bags that can be used again and again rather than use of single-use plastics. Then plastic waste can be managed better if we implement circular economy. True, because if plastic is a waste, you can, by implementing circular economy, that means once a waste is generated, you transform it into something that can be again brought back into the economy in the form of material or energy or whatever. So the plastic can be the recycled, refurbished, or repurposed. Different options are there. It can be converted into different other chemicals or fuel, and then contribute again in the economy. After that, all plastics are polymers, but not all polymers are plastic. This is also true because even the plastics, due to the nature of it, consist of a chain of monomers with a uniform structure. So even though that is true, but there are various other stuff like that. For example, cellulose, hemicellulose, which are also polymers, but they don't fall under the bracket of plastic. So these were the 15 questions that we had discussed today. And in the next live session on the coming Monday again, we can have a new set of questions. And also there have been few doubts which were raised by our audience here on the plastic waste, recent data on plastic waste generation, and then on the impact of temperature on microplastic generation. So these things will also be discussed in the upcoming class. Apart from that, if we have, let's see any other question, what if we opt for circular economy for plastic waste especially? So for circular economy, basically, if you take a look at the circular economy principle based figures, you will see that once the waste is generated, in order to bring it back into the economy, instead of just throwing it away and forgetting about it, you need to bring it back in the form of, let's say, some chemicals, in the form of energy, or in fact, the simplest one is recycling. So if plastic waste is generated, let's say you have generated a plastic bottle of Coke after drinking it, you manage it properly and reached a recycling center. The bottle was again recycled into something else, which was used back for some other purpose. That means once the waste bottle is generated, you are not throwing it away, you are bringing it back into the economy. So it kind of becomes a loop. Something that was about to go out of the economy, it is brought back into the economy because that recycled bottle, it also has some price. It will also generate some revenue. So the question is, what if we opt? So I hope that it answers your question, Karishma Das. If you want any specific area to be addressed, you can write that in the chat box. Okay, so I don't think we have any more questions left. So if you have any other questions, you're always invited to share that in the upcoming class on the next Monday. So now we can call it a day. See you again in the next class. Thank you for your presence, for the amazing questions that you have asked. So it was really interactive, and I also get a lot to learn from these kind of sessions. Thank you for your presence again, and see you in the next class.